Hey there, it's your career insider, Cindy Thomas. Welcome to Season 3 of the Insiders Career Club podcast, where industry professionals share the inside, and I've got that in air quotes, scoop on their careers. Listeners know that I'm an HR career professional who's been in TA for over 25 years. But did you also know that I coach clients and help them plan and grow their careers, manage career transitions, help refine your interviewing skills, or I can help you work on a job search strategy? Now, have you been passed over for a promotion or a raise? Maybe you're frustrated because you're interviewing but not getting the job offer. If that's happened to you, let me help you get back on track. Sign up for a free coaching call today with me at insiderscareerclub.com. Remember, it's possible for you to have a great and a fulfilling career. Let's get you the career you deserve. Now, don't go anywhere. Up next is a great podcast. Stay tuned. Our guest today is Rob Broadhead. He's the founder of and a frequent contributor to Develpreneur, which includes the Building Better Developers podcast. As a developer, designer, and manager of software solutions, he's a lifetime learner. He's also the founder of RB Consulting and has authored a book about his family experiences as well as becoming a better developer. In his free time, he stays busy raising, count them, not one, not two, but 5 children, although they have grown into adults. Now, when he has a chance to breathe, he's on the ice playing hockey to relax or working on his ballroom dance skills. Let's welcome him into the show. Rob, it's so nice to have you on the call. I'm looking forward to chatting with you this morning.
I'm doing the same. Look forward to this.
Well, good. Let's start with you sharing a little bit about yourself with us. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, briefly a military brat for a few years. We spent our lives basically a Federal Express family, in their headquarters from the heydays all the way through to graduating high school, and then headed out to Indiana for a few years for school, up to Chicago for a while. Mm-hmm. And then worked my way down to been in Nashville for almost 30 years now. It's like, it's wow. A nice, exactly my kind of climate and weather.
Oh, wonderful. Now I hope you're not getting affected by those storms that have been, I've heard so much about on the news.
It wasn't too bad. It could have been much worse. It was one of those that it was just lots of wind, lots of rain and thunder and lightning, but it wasn't anything that was too bad. We didn't have things blown down, or from what I could tell, we didn't have too many accidents or anything like that either.
Oh, that sounds good. So let's talk about your business. You're the founder and Developreneur. Hey, I got it right. Of your own business. Talk to us about why you felt the need to start your own company.
Actually, I've started a couple. So there's Develpreneur. Before that was RB Consulting. And that really the first sort of led to the second. Developreneur was a spinoff where we were just going out and looking for resources, and whether it was directly for my company or for some of my customers, finding people that were good technical workers that could code, that could develop. We had some people that we had worked with that it became sort of it's like a mentor / mastermind / not quite boot camp, I guess, sort of like ongoing education kind of site. And the idea was that just sort of get a bunch of people together, share content, and help people learn about technology at whatever point they are. If they just want to keep up a little bit, if they're very technical, but wherever they fall in that range, we've got something for them.
Okay. So you were more about educating others rather than, because when you were talking, I thought, well, were you also helping people find jobs and placing them in roles?
As a consultant, it was not so much helping them find jobs as helping companies find prospects and employees as part of helping them build up their IT department or group or created, software development team. So it was as teams needed to be built or formed or expanded, we were looking for people to we're trying to get a pool of resources out there that could help with that.
Oh, okay. Well, that was certainly a boon to the businesses you were working with. Now let's go back to you deciding to pick a major in school. Why did you choose software development as your career focus?
It was almost like a dartboard kind of a selection process. I was not the most focused on going into college. I knew it was something I needed to do. I knew it was something I wanted to do. I knew I needed, I wanted a degree because I wanted to do something in science or math or something along those lines. Mm-hmm. And I got into college and then almost immediately they're like, hey, you need to pick a major. And it never occurred to me that I was going to have to pick a major. I figured I'd be able to go to school for a year or something like that and then sort of figure out what major I wanted. And they said, no, you got to get it right now. I'm like, okay, well, computer science sounds good. And I figured, well, I can always change it later if I want to. And fortunately, I never wanted to. I mean, there were some times where I was struggling and I was like, gosh, is this really what I'm going to, am I going to be able to do this? But particularly as I got further into my degree, I realized I really it's the kind of work that I enjoy. If I didn't get paid, I would still do a lot of the same stuff that I do.
Mm-hmm. Well, Rob, you are one of the lucky few. Some people get it right from the very start. I'm just thinking of my own career. I went to school and I was going to teach the rest of my life. I come from a family of educators. I graduated. I decided to major in physical education, which was my major. My minor was speech drama. And I had the opportunity to teach for a few years. And then there were no jobs in California. You just couldn't find a job. Then I transitioned out and had to figure out what I wanted to do. Lucky for me, I had office skills. And so I went in and I started working in offices and I ended up in HR and I've kind of been in HR ever since. So everybody's different. So it's lucky for you that you kind of out of the air picked the right one for you.
Yeah, it is. That's actually something we talk about a lot in the Developreneur. A lot of people are not in what they really enjoy, and that's sort of the entrepreneurial side of it. Is that there's side hustles and things like that. Particularly in the modern world, there are a lot of ways for people to do what they want and find ways to earn money, and in a lot of cases, a full living doing what they like. It's just. Yeah, I don't think people think about that often enough. They sort of do it in reverse. They say, hey, we need to earn enough money to pay my bills and things like that. Sort of backs into their career because they say, well, I've got to get money, so I've got to go get a job. What's a job that pays that I can afford the lifestyle I want to become accustomed to, as opposed to saying, what do I like to do? And then how can I find a way to make that something that will pay my bills? You sort of got forced into a different area, but a lot of people run into a few, and probably in HR, you've run into this. People go in, a year or 2, 5 years into their career and they go, I don't want to do this. I want to go do something else. And that's, they've got some skills, they got some basic skills, so they can, usually it gives them a little more flexibility to move around. And a lot of times more flexibility than they realize.
Yes. And that's a very good point. Working in HR and bringing people into companies, I would see people with all kinds of degrees, but they had either they had very little experience in it, or they decided that they wanted to switch careers, transition into something else. So, for a time there was hardly anybody that was doing what they went to school to do, especially salespeople. They come from all walks of life. That's a very key thing for you to bring up. What is it about this work that you find fulfilling?
I am at the heart of everything. I am a problem solver. Even when as a kid, I loved, puzzle books, and they've got different names over the years. They were called like 2-minute mysteries and things like that. But these little, they're basically mysteries, but with a little bit of logical problems and stuff like that. And I've always liked it. Always liked math. I've got a little bit of a laziness to me as well. I like creating shortcuts, which works out perfect as I get into this, because I talk to people all the time, and what is your pain point? What is your problem in business? And then look at ways to either automate it or otherwise, solve that problem, is find a way to get them from point A to point B. And so it never gets boring. There's always business problems out there. There's always new things to do. even if they're similar, they're different enough. There's always a little bit of a challenge to the problem solving part of it. So that keeps me happy every day.
Yeah. I wouldn't call that lazy, Rob. I'd call that wanting to work efficiently. When you're
like that's so much better.
When you're wanting to find a way to find a more streamlined way to do something, that's just being more efficient.
Yeah, and that's true. I do enjoy that. It's the, do it better. It's great to be able to solve. Sometimes that's what we're doing. It's, hey, you've got that problem solved, but let's find a way to do it more efficiently to increase, productivity or something along whatever the measurement is.
Tell us exactly what a developer does, because I want people to understand there's a difference between a developer and a programmer. And I think that gets confused a lot in people's minds. So would you share that with us?
Thank you for asking. That's actually an excellent question. A coder is somebody that just writes code and it tends to be a lower skilled type of work, because it's really, if you think about things like most people probably have worked like in a spreadsheet. There's a difference between somebody that can just put numbers into a spreadsheet and somebody that can actually make, charts out of it and graphs and do a lot of, complex computations. And that's sort of the difference when you get into developers is they're still writing code, but really their focus is the application or the solution they're building. Whereas a coder, it's really just, they're going to write code and somebody more or less directs them and says, this is, essentially the kind of code you need to write, versus a developer is solving a problem and they can code, but their value comes that they're the problem solver. If you think of like building a house, it's the difference between somebody that is essentially an architect that can put together the blueprints and build a house versus, somebody that can swing a hammer or, cut wood or something like that. Yeah, so it's very different levels of skill.
Yeah, it very much is. I think of it as being more creative because it's dealing with concepts and creating a solution, right? Rather than being a coder who tends to be, if you think of it in other terms, more of a technician. They're using what's there, but they're not creating it.
Correct.
From a personal attributes or talents, besides problem solving, what does someone need to be able to do well in this type of position?
Patience. The problem solving part of it often is a lot of trial and error. At the end of the day, programming is just numbers. It's just math. So you would think computers are very logical. Then you'd think that it would just be very logical and you just sort of could figure out your solution and you're off and running. But, and especially in modern software, there are a lot of very complex problems being solved and a lot of moving parts. It would be nice if you could just understand the whole thing, but it tends to be so big that you're sort of pushing pieces through and saying, okay, I think that this will go through these 3 steps and it'll come out in this state and will be good. And sometimes it's not. And sometimes it's human error. Sometimes it's logic error. Sometimes it's the problem itself. So there is a lot of repetition as far as like going back through, trying it, make sure that it works, verifying it, and then, using that and using that sort of your foundation or your step to the next piece of the problem or the next phase of the problem that you're going to solve. And with that, of course, is the ability to understand and grasp and think in a very logical way. I mean, more like a mathematical, technical logic, to be able to understand what it means to what and means in a mathematical sense, and or means, and some of those other things is understanding how to apply. I'm trying to remember which classes you would have run into in high school, but how you can apply logic to expressions and convert them and evaluate them in that way. It does take some level of attention to detail. Computers sort of force you to have more attention to detail because they are very explicit in how you talk to them. If you think about people that typically would, texting or something like that, where it's very autocorrect and things like that, make us very patient with other people. We sort of learn to read through mistakes versus, something that's like maybe an email that you're writing to your boss or something like that, where you want to be very precise. Or if you know one of these, we call them the grammar Nazis or whatever, people that are very focused on grammar and being able to, be grammatically correct at how you do it as well. Think about like a college professor that's going to grade your paper. it's different. And so you have to have that attention to detail to be able to communicate especially to communicate to the computer. If you've got those, that helps immensely. And you've got to be able to stare at a screen for long periods of time.
Yeah. But there's also a couple of other elements, I think. It's interacting with the client. You have to use user interface, make sure that user interface for the user is going to be something that they can understand, that you're on target with what you're designing or creating is really what they need. And being able to see the complete picture, because when you are at a granular level running these things through, you still have to hold that picture in mind of where you want to get to. So I would add those, and you can tell me if I'm correct.
They are. If this is one of those that depends on what kind of an organization you're in, and it sort of actually goes back to a little bit that programmer versus coder versus developer kind of discussion, is that you can be in organizations where there are people that their roles are essentially those pieces. There's somebody that talks to, like a business analyst that talks to a customer and can translate to a technology kind of thing. And then there's also those that are really like software architects and that talk to customers and have that big picture view. Those are great points, because ideally as a developer, it helps quite a bit to understand what it is that you're actually doing. You're not just writing code, you're writing code that somebody's going to use this solution. So it has to be something where you understand that user enough to give them something that's going to work with, help them work and not be a burden to them. I think we've all had software that it's clunky or, whatever it is, the interface is not one that's at least not elegant. You've got to understand that customer to build that sort of an interface. And then you have to, I guess with that really is you have to understand what questions and how to ask questions to help others solve their problem a little bit. I need a solution for this. And inevitably, they are not going to think about it in a detailed enough way for you to be able to just solve that problem without you guessing. So you have to go back and you're going to have to make sure you can ask the right questions. And you think about it like anything that we do regularly, we have a lot of things that have just become habit or that we assume that others would know. The old classic is explain to somebody how to tie a shoe. A lot of us can go tie a shoe and don't, because we don't even think about it.
Right.
But to actually explain the steps is beyond some of us, our ability to do it. We're like, I don't know how I would even begin to describe that. So that's part of what a good developer is going to do, is be able to ask the questions to help them, basically to pull those ideas out of somebody's head and be able to actually verbalize them and then use that to, eventually help define what the solution needs to be.
Great. When you think over your career, is there an instance that you would say was a career defining moment for you?
I was working for a consulting company, and work had sort of dried up, and they had some stuff to do, but I was like, hey, I want to go actually work. I don't want to just be sitting in an office. That they had, what you call a bench back in the day, where people had you had consultants hired, but they weren't working because you wanted them ready when you got a job or a contract. And they had most of us on the bench. I was looking around and talked to some people, and had some people I'd worked for in the past that talked to me and said, hey, we would love for you to come in. We just need a consultant. We're not as an employee. And at that point I had just maybe tossed around the idea of working for myself and being a consultant. And that turned everything on, put me in a really good situation to say, all right, I'm going to take a leap. And that made, I think, all the difference moving forward.
Can you tell us about a personal challenge you had to deal with as a developer, like dealing with meeting deadlines for something that was already for something that needed to be fully developed, or maybe even a change of development focus? And how did you deal with it?
I think the general thing that sort of to generalize across several of those is that it is not uncommon at all. Going back to sort of what I previously talked about, is that people have a vision of how they want things to work, and it doesn't always get translated to the rest of the team, and particularly to the development team. And there have been several situations where you get to the quote the end. You think you're at the end. Sometimes it's big somethings, sometimes it's little somethings, but there are things that were left off or that don't work properly or are clunky based on what the customer wants. It's not uncommon to have those kinds of oversights or things that got missed. Like most of us, as you get further on, you get better at such things. But each time it's a little bit of a like, okay, stop. Let's consider what is it that we're missing, and let's figure out how to make that correct. As opposed to early on, one of the things experiences taught me is that, early on, you sort of just quickly say, oh, well, we can fix this. We can just change this here. When you do that, you end up in think about like kids on a trip with their parents. It's like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Could you make a change? And you say, is this right? And they'll say, oh, no, I need this. And you're like, okay, well, is this right? No, I need that. And instead of getting into that cycle, it's hard because you have this forward momentum to get that project done, and you've got deadlines, you've got pressure, but it's incredibly valuable to just sort of say, okay, let's stop for a second. Let's look at this in detail. How is this supposed to look? And particularly sometimes you have to say, divorce yourself from what exists currently. And what is it that you thought this was supposed to be? And then we can figure out if what we did was completely wrong, needs to be rewritten, or is it close and we can make some adjustments. And then sometimes there's that conversation with it, a little bit of a give and take that says, hey, we didn't get you exactly what you wanted. And we can, but it's going to cost X amount of time. Mm-hmm. But we can make these couple of tweaks, and it won't be perfect, but it'll be closer, and it will be done in, half the time. Is that okay? And so it becomes a little bit of a negotiating and helping them understand what are the costs involved so they can make a good decision.
Now, I understand, speaking of kids, because you made a reference earlier to Are We There Yet? I understand you're a single parent. How do you manage to be a full-time parent and keep your business on track?
I started doing remote work around it's now the turn of the century. So around 2000, 2001, somewhere in there. Mm-hmm. And that was while my wife was still alive. So I was able to sort of get comfortable with that kind of approach, that way to do work. And so when I ended up having to raise kids, I don't think I realized until that time how invaluable it was to not have a commute time, to not have to spend as much time getting ready for work, and to have the things that, things I lost, which you don't get if you're not in an office, that we've now all experienced the last couple of years, talking to coworkers and having the equivalent of the water cooler discussion, all that kind of stuff. You miss out on it. But when you're home, and part of what's, I guess, sort of drove me to do it, because I had so much to do with dealing with the kids, is instead of that, that 5 minutes at the water cooler, if I had a couple of minutes that I was sort of waiting for an email response or something like that, I could go, kick off a load of laundry or run a load of dishes, or, get the kids crank out a meal real quick for the kids, or things like that. And then also, since I did stuff that was much more project based, and it wasn't like I wasn't in a situation where I had to like clock in each day or anything. So if I needed to take a couple hours and go deal with a doctor appointment or, whatever, because, with kids, they've got all these different things at random times up at the part of their schedule. That flexibility allowed me to do it. And it's exhausting at times because I rarely work a Monday to Friday. I don't think I've ever worked a Monday to Friday, like 8 to 5, 8 to 4, whatever kind of a schedule. Mm-hmm. I end up start a little early. I'll work late here and there. A lot of times stuff will spill over the weekends, particularly when the kids were younger, because there's just so many things that would come up that I was like, okay, I can't get as much done today. Go until you collapse, and then, pick it up on Saturday or Sunday, use some of the extra time there to sort of catch up on work that needs to be done.
What are some of the career growth paths available for software developers?
It is an area where there's a lot of paths that you can go. There's really the primary ones are, you can stay technical and you can go from typically people start in sort of a coder role. Then you can work up to, you can be a designer, you can be an architect, you can stay more technical and go even to like a CTO type of role and things like that. But you can also get into more of a management lead type of area where you can actually, be a software development. You can manage a team. You can, be a director, things like that. where it's people. So you can do more of that. So you've got like the technical stuff that usually ends up being like a CTO. You've got the people stuff that's really more like I guess sort of like a CIO. But then you also you can go more of a product and a solution route. It's sort of it tends to be a combination, I guess, of those two, where there may be a little bit of people things that you're managing, but it's really more about basically like product development and more into like sales and marketing and understanding the features in your users and how to provide them what they need. That's going to be pushing you more towards commercial software. But sometimes internally, if you're in a company, it's particularly like big organizations, they're going to have people that are really driving these products that they use internally that everybody in the company maybe uses for their systems, for their order, their invoice, or whatever it is that they need to do to keep the business moving.
Okay. If someone wanted to learn more about this type of position, where would you advise they go to learn more?
One place you can go out to the Develpreneur.com. We talk about such things quite a bit, but there are actually the nice thing, because they're technical jobs, you get out on the internet. And if there is a particularly if it's a title that you want, or even a job description that you want to know more about, a lot of times you can drop that into Google or your favorite search engine, and you will find, granted, you're going to find a lot of things that are people looking for, that are job sites looking for that. But then you will also find a lot of resources out there. There's a lot of organizations that can be very niche in what, sort of the direction that a developer will take, or actually even thinking more like a technician might take. You can even take some of the keywords like, if it's coding or security or software development or something like that. And there's a lot of excellent resources out on the internet as far as whatever your choice is, whether you want to read websites and blogs, whether you want to listen to podcasts, whether you want to look at YouTube videos. There is a wealth of information out there. Okay.
And the first one was Developer or
Develpreneur.com. So DEVELPRENEUR.com.
All right, great. And tell us just a little bit more about your business before we wrap up and how people can find you.
Basically, I said we have Develpreneur we use we're really sort of changing its focus a little bit and becoming much more specific training organized as a specific training organization. We've done content for years. We've got a podcast, we've got YouTube channels and things like that. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to take some of that content and make it a little more, I guess, easier to search and a little more digestible for those that want to learn. If you have a more specific learning path you want to take, we're providing that. And that's at the aforementioned Develpreneur.com. And then from a consulting point of view, rb-sns.com is where I am available to talk to. I talk to companies all the time about how can you maybe take those first steps into utilizing technology to solve your problems and remove some of your pain points and make your company work a little better.
Wonderful. Well, Rob, it's been delightful speaking to you. I'm so glad you joined us today.
I am so glad I did too. This has been great.
Well, I'm going to give you some time back in your day and sign off, but thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks a lot, Cindy. You have a great day.
All right, you too. Thanks for listening, and your support's a blessing. If you enjoyed the podcast, give us a positive rating on Apple. It will help our podcast ranking on all the major sites like Apple, Google, Spotify, etc. We release new podcasts every 2 weeks on the first and third Wednesdays. Now your support is needed. Keep listening and share these career-changing podcasts with your friends, your family, your coworkers, and anyone else you feel it will bless. In addition to the major sites, they can also find these podcasts on my website at insiderscareerclub.com. Now, if you're not happy with your career, let me help you. I can help you get your career on track. Sign up for a free coaching call with me today. Before you go, let's speak victory over you. You have a bright future. Good breaks are looking for you, and new doors are about to swing wide open with opportunity. Believe it. Until next time, take care.